Hello everyone, and welcome to Mr. This is Asia, and here's Kyrgyzstan. Now come on, let's go, shall we? Nestled in the midst of the Tian Shan Mountains of Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan was in ancient times inhabited by the Iranian Scythians, whose horses thundered through the pristine valleys for centuries. But as you may have noticed, the country's called Kyrgyzstan, not Scythianistan. So where does the Kyrgyz fit into the stan? Well, the Kyrgyz are a Turkic people who migrated from the east, settling for some time in the forests along the banks of the Yenisei River in Siberia around the 6th century. Not far from Mongolia, the Kyrgyz fell under the rule of the Uyghur people in the mid-700s, but were far from willing subordinates. And in 840 the Kyrgyz broke free and drove the Uyghurs out of Mongolia, who would later settle in northwest China. Meanwhile, the Kyrgyz folk began spreading out and taking up residence in what would one day be known as Kyrgyzstan. But for over 100 years ruled over a far bigger expanse. All this ended in the early 1200s as the Mongols took over. So the centuries passed and the Kyrgyz kept largely to themselves, breeding horses, growing barley, and practicing their shamanistic religion in the shadows of the mountains. By the 16th and 17th centuries, most Kyrgyz lived where they do now, and the early 18th century saw them locked in vicious war with the Mongol Dzungar people, a conflict that persisted until the Chinese crushed the Dzungar after 1755. Chinese rule was followed by that of the Uzbek Khanate of Korkan, during which time Islam was introduced. And then the late 19th century saw Kyrgyzstan fall to the Russian Empire, and subsequent uprisings were ruthlessly stamped out. Russian rule followed into the Soviet era, in which time the country modernized and saw standards of living improve. Finally, in 1991, Kyrgyzstan became a sovereign nation after centuries of being bullied and pushed about by its neighbors. The interestingly eyebrowed Askar Akayev became the first president. As with all countries, things went well and then not so well, and the economy began to suffer in the mid-90s, and the president, increasingly accused of corruption, was overthrown in the Tulip Revolution of 2005. The new president was also accused of corruption, and fiery demonstrations flared up in 2010, which police suppressed with live ammunition, killing 80 and wounding many more. As the protests continued, the president fled to Belarus. A decade later, and the country was still outraged over government corruption, and Kyrgyzstan today, with its medium level of human development, is classed as a developing nation, and hopefully better times await the citizens of this beautiful country. So that's it for Kyrgyzstan, and that's all from me for now. Bye-bye!